Hi, my name is Anna Kate Babineau, and today I'm here to talk to you about how we can effectively plan for fostering good communication in higher education. So the scenario that we're talking about today is a scenario where we're trying to foster effective communication within a curriculum planning team at the higher education level. So first I want to go through some best practices and some strategies to do so, as well as talk about why doing so can be difficult in higher education and how to de-escalate if there's any disagreements that come about in this process. So the first thing that I believe is very important when we're trying to have effective communication at the higher education level is to involve all stakeholders, involve as many perspectives as you need to be successful. So the last thing you want is, just one person sitting in a room coming up with a whole curriculum, because that could lead to blind spots, that could lead to them missing something, that could lead to the curriculum being biased in some way or inaccessible to some students in some way. So it's really important that we have all the different stakeholders involved in the process. So if I was putting together a team to put together higher education curriculum, you obviously want to have faculty who have extensive content knowledge on that team. Another person you want to have on that team is someone who has experience going through the curriculum process. Piggyback off their experiences, what works well, what doesn't, what's okay, what's not, all of that. And especially want to make sure that you have someone that deals with accessibility on your team, right? You want to make sure that everything you're planning curriculum-wise is accessible to all students or can be adapted to be accessible to all students. Very important. And, this is something that is not new to higher education, but it can often be forgotten about. There's an article by UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization that talks about how higher education institutions like WU, Vienna University, and XMU in China really put an emphasis on involving all stakeholders in their processes for communication about quality assurance. And even though it's not quite the same thing, it still really relates. We want to make sure our curriculum is the highest quality possible. So that's the first strategy or best practices: involve all important stakeholders. Some other strategies for best practice that were brought up by Boyer in his article were sharing information. Make sure that everybody on the team shares all the information about their specific role as they can, all the pertinent information anyway. If you're on a curriculum team, maybe have a Google Drive that you guys can all drop materials into to foster communication that way so everybody's on the same page. If you're a little more technologically savvy, you could use a Slack channel to communicate as well. There's a lot of different options, but just make sure that communication is always being fostered and you have ease of communication with your teammates. The next thing is soliciting feedback. As we all know, there's processes you have to go through when you're submitting curriculum at higher education institutions, and a lot of people kind of see that as cumbersome and maybe a lot of red tape to go through, but it's very important that we get feedback to make sure that we didn't miss anything, to make sure that everything's accessible or adaptable for all students. So that feedback solicitation is a huge strategy to have good communication surrounding the curriculum. The next thing would be develop a contingency plan. Work with your teammates to figure out, okay, if we submit this to whatever process it has to go through to become approved, what are we going to do if they come back to us and say that there's an issue? What's our plan going to be? So have those contingency plans. So to summarize that, involve all stakeholders, share information, solicit feedback, and have a plan to deal with that feedback. It can be difficult sometimes to have this effective communication in higher education, and that's probably because everybody at this level has to be a master in their field, has to have mastery, and that can sometimes lead to egos. There's also a lot of different backgrounds and opinions, which can lead to conflict as well. So what do we do when there's conflict, right? How do we de-escalate disagreements? And I found this great article by Davey from the Harvard Business Review website, and I just wanted to share a couple quotes really quickly about what we can do to de-escalate these disagreements. And Davey really focuses on that most disagreements, when they become kind of aggressive and stuff, it's really necessarily about the actual disagreement itself. It's more underlying things. So, be supportive of your colleagues. Don't be defensive. Don't try to, take over the conversation. Really listen to what they're saying. Demonstrate you're listening and be supportive. Watch your body language. And here's a direct quote from Davey that I'd really like to share because I think it just sums all this up perfectly on how to de-escalate disagreements. It says, "When faced with an angry, aggressive colleague, self-defensive reactions will only make matters worse. Respond by signaling that you're prepared to address the concerns and willing to get to the bottom of the issue. It will take restraint, but it will transform the situation and perhaps the relationship from conflict to cooperation." So there you have it. I hope this video is helpful to you for curriculum planning, and good luck.